So the reviews are in from this weekend's huge group of visitors, and they're glowing.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA Radio Network's Luke Robinson. That's me. Alabama internet legend Jimmy Stein. That's him. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. We'll talk about Monarch Money in just a bit. Thank you, everydayers, for being here every day. Thank you, newbies, for being here today. And thanks to everybody for making us your first listen every single day. You guys are the best. So, Jimmy, the reviews are in, as I mentioned, from the big recruiting weekend. And according to all accounts, everything went swimmingly.
I like the swimmingly part, since they spent some time on the lake on the boat. It felt like the old Saban days in so many ways. It did feel like a Nick Saban thing, but here's what doesn't feel like a Saban thing to me about these visits. Obviously, these kids have a good time on the visits. As we talked about on the last show, kids that take official visits to places like New Mexico State, they have a good time too. I mean, no shot at them. I'm just saying, everyone has a good time everywhere, no matter where they go on official visits, because it's an all expense. It's like you won something. It's an all expenses paid trip where they entertain you and you know, love all over you for 2 or 3 days. So you know they're going to have a good time. But here's a huge difference to me, Luke. Don't just read the quotes from players who said that was a great visit, or an analyst who said so and so had a great visit. Read what the players don't have to say, but they say anyway. The over-the-top stuff, you know, is what stands out to me. Secondly, and there's a lot of that. Secondly, I noticed during the Saban years when kids would make their official visit, and all this descends from the head coach, it was very businesslike. And the kids had a great time, and Alabama was a place everyone wanted to officially visit. But you would read quotes all the time about how strictly business. At Alabama, it's business. They mean business. You can tell why they win. That's what you read a lot. Now, under the DeBoer, Courtney Morgan weekends, there's a lot different talk. Not better, not worse. It's just different. And it starts with, I think, the atmosphere and a family-like atmosphere. And, you know, these kids that feel at home and feel comfortable. I think it all descends from the head coach. The last guy was the best businessman, CEO, head coach of all time. The new guy is everyone's favorite uncle. He's everyone's favorite uncle. Everyone likes him. Everyone wants to play for him because they like him. And that's what comes across to me on the visit quotes, is how comfortable my parents are comfortable with this. I'm comfortable with this. It feels like a family. Everyone is so nice. I read one quote: Southern hospitality is real. That's a different. It is a stark difference, but the end results are likely to be very similar, because I think we're on the verge once again of signing a very highly rated class nationally.
Yeah, in fact, this quote from Booby Feaster, which ironically was my nickname in college for different reasons altogether, but that was good, Jimmy. What is wrong with
it? I was reading the quote. Yeah.
All right. Booby Feaster said they treat everybody like family. Some programs got individuals, and that's good for a team in the SEC, but them having players with a real close bond, that's going to hold each other accountable. Now,
that's from a BOL. That's from a BOL story, I believe. That's Booby's talking to Bone, I believe, on from a BOL story.
Yeah, and we got to give Bone credit for that, because we always will, because he's a friend of the program. But I think that is more like what you would have seen, at least the family part, obviously, from an Auburn visit or something like that in the past, whereas you're right that Alabama has always been a little more business. And I think there's a happy medium in there, and I think Booby Feaster found it, where you want to be family-oriented, you want to feel like you're trusted and that you trust other people, that you have a bond. at the same time, the ultimate goal is to get to the next level and to create as much wealth for yourself and your family as you can NIL wise at your respective universities. So I think that Alabama may have found that good, happy medium. And I love that quote from Booby Feaster. And it certainly makes me feel better about potentially his ultimately ended up in this class.
That's possible. Every kid that visited this weekend, not one kid visited that I feel that Alabama has no shot at. That Alabama has a shot at every single kid that was there. Some better shots than others. Booby, at some point he's going this place or that place. I think Texas A&M's been a place recently where there's been a lot of conjecture. They all are going on more visits. I don't expect, as we sit here right now on Monday morning, I don't expect anyone that just visited to cancel remaining visits and commit to Alabama. That could happen because Alabama's in good shape for a couple of these kids. Nolan Wilson, almost called him Tristan again. Titan Davis from Missouri, Nolan Wilson from Mississippi. These guys love Alabama a lot. But even then, I still think those guys will go on other visits, and then have and besides, recruiting's changed so much. Luke and I grew up in an era where these kids would come visit usually in January because signing day is February. They come January and often commit to the reporter on the phone because that's about as much media coverage as they were going to get during recruiting. So they would commit to a reporter on the phone and say, yeah, I committed, and put that out there. Now kids like to build up I have an announcement date, and they put it on social media. I'm going to announce on such and such date. Then the date comes, and then they got some big digital graphic that Hayes Fawcett at On3 put together for them. That's generally the way kids roll these days. It's a little different. And so I think that maybe Alabama's going to land some of these kids, but it's likely to be more known down the road after they make some official big announcement.
I want to bring up another quote from Nolan Wilson, who he said Alabama was the team to beat. And this is a guy that's an incredible defensive lineman out of Mississippi. But you just got me thinking about, again, going back in the Wayback Machine, about how it used to be where if you were recruiting, you'd get a phone call and then you'd commit that way. And there wasn't any Twitter. It wasn't a big brouhaha. It may even be like it was a few days before the Tuscaloosa News even reported it or whatever. Right. But it's amazing. And this is why, for anybody who thinks the kids shouldn't be paid, this is why they probably should be paid. That the cottage industries that have been created by recruiting, first of all, it was not a big deal. Then it became a little deal. Now it's got all these various sites. Even ESPN and CBS have their own little recruiting things. Then we get to have our own Locked On channel where we spend, we're told explicitly, and we want to do this anyway, to talk recruiting as much as possible because that's what people want to talk about and listen to. And so it's created all these other streams of revenue for people that the kids should get something for that. Every now and again, when we get disenchanted with the current system, I have to remind myself, hey, everybody else is kind of making money off of these guys to a degree. And it's just funny because if you had told me 30 years ago that, hey, there's going to be all these various websites dedicated to recruiting, and there's going to be a huge industry of people selling bottled water, I still think about that sometimes. Like, I can just go to the faucet, yet I still buy the bottled water. It doesn't make any sense. We live in a country where water is pretty clean. But anyway, I do want to bring up the quote from Nolan Wilson. It says, the culture around it, meaning Alabama. When I went up to Alabama, my player host was Keon Keeley. He showed me the dynamic around Alabama. The biggest thing from that is Keon Keeley apparently is a Gump, which I love. That's the biggest thing. And
again, that's another quote from a BOL story.
It is another quote from BOL. I appreciate your making sure we get
everybody get their due credit for their work and get the quotes. But
isn't that interesting that Keon Keeley, this guy who came in, some people thought he's number one player in the country several years ago. He hadn't really peed a drop at Alabama. I don't mean that derogatory. It sounds very derogatory, but he hadn't done much yet. He apparently loves the place. That makes me want him to do better even more.
And then, we'll talk about roster ranking day. He's nowhere near in roster rank. He's going to be higher than a lot of y'all think, because I think Keon Keeley is on the verge of somewhat of a breakout season this fall, and he's finally ready. To me, it stands out that Keon is Nolan Wilson's host, because it tells me that we're telling Nolan Wilson, we're recruiting Nolan Wilson as a bandit, which is where Keon Keeley's playing, and we're telling Nolan Wilson and recruiting him to play bandit. Now, I happen to believe that much like Keon Keeley, who kind of was recruited as an outside linebacker and grew into a bandit at Alabama, I think Nolan Wilson might be a guy recruited as a bandit that grows into more of a defensive tackle. That's what I think might happen with him. But he's probably a bandit, right off the bat. And who knows, maybe body-wise he ends up sticking there. But I do know this, he's really good. This is an elite top 100 kid. For him to come out and say Bama's in the lead, that's a big deal, because this is a kid that could go almost anywhere he wants in the country, and defensive line recruiting is still a big thing. So good work by Keon this weekend as his player host, and for Nolan Wilson to have such a good time that he leaves the weekend, again, reiterating Alabama's in the lead for me, and thanks to Bone for doing the hard work of getting those quotes.
Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, hey, where'd all my money go? I only do it every day. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in just one place. So you stop managing your money and you start building wealth. And that's what we're all trying to do here. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's all one word, LOCKEDONCollege, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And thank Jimmy and me later on when we save you and make you a ton of money with Monarch Money. Anything else you wanted to throw in there recruiting wise before we get into your roster ranking countdown?
Nope. Still enjoying, from work at BOL, still enjoying the reviews from the recruits again with these glowing remarks. And let's remember, we're in official visit season. Tomorrow's show, we're going to start talking about the next wave of kids that are coming next weekend, just as impressive as this past weekend in terms of, the notoriety of fewer kids, not a lot fewer. And 3 of the kids coming in next weekend are actually already committed to Alabama. But boy, there's some big targets coming in, including Xavier Griffin, who's one of Alabama's top priorities, other kids as well. And I would just call this past weekend a huge success, regardless of the fact that there's not some public commitment made just yet. I feel very confident on a handful of the kids that were there this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, I made a bold prediction. I made several terrible bold predictions this weekend. Alabama would get out of the regional, and they lost their only 2 games.
And Vanderbilt lost.
Huh?
Do you know Vanderbilt lost?
I know.
Yeah. So had Alabama won the Hattiesburg Regional, they'd have been hosting the Super Regional this upcoming weekend against either Wright State or Louisville, and been favored, obviously. Yeah. But boy, 0-2 in Hattiesburg.
I mean, again, we give a lot of praise when it's due. You got to be critical when it's due. That was unacceptable.
They laid an egg for sure.
And I've already seen some dudes from Bama in the transfer portal. I'm assuming they were guided that way. I don't know if they were directed that way, but they were.
They have not lost anyone yet that they would have fought to keep. Not yet. Now the problem is, you have a return. Justin LeBron's the biggest maybe superstar in college baseball next year. Teams are going to make a hard run at him, NIL wise about leaving. But keep in mind, for anyone that's so negative about that, same thing happened this past off season. Yeah. A lot of teams were trying to get Justin LeBron in the last portal. And he is stuck with Alabama, and Alabama's taking care of him best they can. But but baseball NIL is a little different than football NIL. But I feel pretty good about where the program is and the direction of the program. It's just such a head shaking moment that so much opportunity was right there for the taking, and they just laid an egg.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to say it other than they blew it, and that's unfortunate. And it was a golden opportunity missed. But regardless, that said, I'm with you. I like the direction of the program. I'm pro Rob Vaughn. Let's be a little more patient. Let's give it a little more time. All right. So roster ranking countdown. Oh, my other bold prediction was we'd get some a commitment from this weekend, which we haven't yet. We could, but we just haven't. So I messed up two predictions.
I think it'll be. I'm still going to count it when kids from this past weekend commit to Alabama in a month. I'm still going to count that.
I think the window is a week and a half.
Okay. Well, you can go a week and a half.
Be a direct result.
I think most kids, in terms of a timeline in 2025, it's not just Alabama, but I think kids basically visit in June and make their decisions known in July. So that's kind of the way I'm generally looking at things. Now, there'll be exceptions along the way, of course.
All right. Roster ranking countdown. Jimmy, we got another one. And it's number 59. I
know. I love when we flip into another, it's like another decade. We're in the 50s now. In the 59, can you believe that we're only 59 days away from fall camp is amazing. Noah Carter is 59 today. And he's a guy that is super interesting to me, Luke, and very hard to rank because I feel like he's a little better than this. I mean, I'm excited about Noah Carter's future. I'm excited about what kind of player he is. I hear some buzz. I hear that they like him. He looks good. He was very highly recruited. The DeBoer and Courtney Morgan staff were involved with him when they were at Washington, and he sort of has followed them to Alabama. You want to reward a kid like that. But here's the thing. The only negative here is just what's ahead of him on the depth chart. I mean, I don't see him playing in front of Quay Russaw. I don't see him really playing in front of Jamarian Latham, who's going to be pretty big off the bench, who's a sixth-year senior. He's going to be kind of hard to leapfrog, a sixth-year guy. Yanze Pierre is a guy they like quite a bit, who's probably ahead of Noah Carter. And now here you got this young guy, Justin Hill, who had a fantastic spring for a true freshman, coming up from behind. So that Wolf spot is one of Alabama's deepest positions on the team. And it's the only reason Noah Carter is down here at 59. But he's such a talented kid. Who among us should be surprised when he ends up playing a role this fall? I mean, I don't think we should be surprised at that. But at the same time, there's just so many Wolves. I have him here at 59. I hope he's patient because I love his long-term future. And I think he's going to be a really good college football player. So I hope he remains patient because what's ahead of him on the depth chart, that's going to unclog and clear out over time. And who knows what you could have injury-wise. But I like Noah Carter, and I think he's on track to have a good career, even if he just redshirted. And this is a redshirt freshman year where we might not see a ton of him outside of special teams. But he's a promising player on this football team for sure.
First of all, it's Wolves.
It is Wolves. Did I say Wolves?
You said Wolves.
Okay. I kind of like
Wolves. I think it's Wolves, even if you're talking about a position on the football team.
I think it probably is, but I don't know. Just Wolves sounds more fun. Sounds more fun to say Wolves.
It does sound that, but it reminds me of Ryan's social media experiment on The Office where he said, "You've been woofed." Remember? And it was you get a fax, you get an email, you get a text, you get a phone call, and it was so annoying. But that's what it kind of reminds me of for no particular reason whatsoever. All right. Speaking of things that I don't want to be reminded of, the Vanderbilt game. Jimmy rewatched it, but he also rewatched the Georgia game. We're going to talk about them both. All right, so Jimmy, you do a rewatch over the summer. You watch losses, you watch wins. I
just watched the whole season chronologically. Start with game one.
And I think it's a great idea. I can't rewatch losses. I just can't do it. I don't enjoy it. It's too frustrating. I'm glad I can't in a way because It just, I don't know. I just don't like it. All right. But the Georgia game, pretty awesome. Let's start with that. Let's also talk about the fact that John Gruden had Ryan Williams in to discuss the play. And Ryan Williams even admitted, I blew an assignment, but it's not really a blown assignment because I scored a touchdown.
Yeah, and he called it a blown assignment because he didn't run the play as coached. But he also was sort of on the same page with Milroe. So Milroe was aware of what he was doing. So I'm not really sure that makes it a missed assignment, and he scored. So they're not going to get on. The thing about that is people wonder about the coaching, that you can't have players go off doing stuff on their own. That's generally true. But I think what's going to happen here is it's going to be very result based. My advice to players, even Ryan, that wants to go off script and do something on their own that wasn't coached, it needs to work. Needs to work. If it works and you score, you're going to get a pat on the back for being smart, inventive, ability to adjust. If you go off script and it fails spectacularly, get ready to push a car around the Coleman Coliseum parking lot at 5 a.m. because you're not taking coaching. But that was a great clip. People ought to watch it. It's on Gruden's Barstool channel. His interview with Ryan and Isaiah Horton. I learned a lot watching it, and it's really good. But the Georgia game, Alabama played so well in the game, especially offensively. It's almost more difficult to watch than the Vanderbilt loss, and this is why. Alabama looks so good throughout so much of the Georgia game, especially offensively, and it's still in the back of your head about how can this same offense be that bad as the season progressed, and you get into the game in Knoxville and the game in Norman and the game against Michigan at the end. How can the offense be that bad? Because it was very good against Georgia. Again, this needs to be reiterated 1,000 times because it's such a big deal. Jalen Milroe had the most productive game at quarterback in terms of throwing and rushing and scoring touchdowns than any quarterback in the history of college football against a top 5 opponent. That's a stunning stat. And the Sunday after the Georgia game, he led every Heisman poll. There was discussion he would be the first pick in the draft. And Alabama's offense, they ran the ball well. There was good play, especially Justice Haynes in particular, probably fired up about playing his in-state Georgia Bulldogs. But Alabama ran it pretty well. They threw it great. Ryan, just sort of his national coming out party. And defensively, it was disappointing in the second half when Georgia made their adjustments. And let's not forget, they have good players too. Georgia's good players stepped up in the second half. But even though Alabama defensively gave up a lot of yards and points in that second half, they still made plays when they had to. And I'll also say this, I'd rather complain about officiating in a win. Some of Georgia's passes that were completed in the second half that led to that comeback, their receiver was pushing off and getting open. It was uncalled time and time again. Like multiple times, there should have been a push-off called, but I'd rather say that after wins, because after losses, I hate complaining about refs. But great performance by Alabama. Alabama looked like a national championship team that night, and then I watched Vanderbilt, and the head shaking started. What was so frustrating? Offense still played fairly well against Vanderbilt. Not great. The pick six really hurt us in that game, offensively. Let's keep in mind, though, first of all, it was a great play by DeRicky Wright, the in-state safety for Vanderbilt, who sort of jumped a route a little bit. Wasn't a terrible play by Milroe there. It was a tip ball that got plucked out of the air and run
Didn't
back.
Didn't it go off a helmet?
He was throwing it to Ryan and DeRicky Wright. It was sort of a 50-50 ball a little bit. And Ryan, somehow the ball got popped up in the air. In other words, it wasn't one of those like against Oklahoma where Milroe sort of hit a DB in stride who could walk into the end zone. There was some good fortune for Vanderbilt involved in that play. But overall, take that play out, the offense was pretty good. They averaged 2 points per minute of possession in the game. So, I mean, they only possessed the ball for 17 minutes and scored 34 points. If they had possessed the ball 30 minutes like they should have, they were on pace to score 60, and yeah, you win that game. So the offense really wasn't bad. The defense was abysmally, terribly bad. But the thing even about that is it wasn't like Vanderbilt was just ripping chunks up and down the field. It was like 3 yards, 4 yards, 2 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, 2 yards. Also this, I think if you ask a lot of Alabama fans that haven't watched that Vandy rewatch, because most of y'all are sane and won't, they'll tell you, boy, Diego Pavia's feet killed us in that game. He killed us with the RPOs. He did, but he really killed us with RPOs throwing the ball. Vanderbilt had more big plays completing passes on third down that were RPO plays where Diego had the run pass option. Many times he passed out of it, and boy, just third down after third down, Alabama just could not make the play to get off the field. And this is an indictment of DeBoer in the sidelines, but I've just got to be honest to say maybe the biggest play in the whole game was in the first half when Alabama had 2 number 2s on the field for a penalty that extended a Vanderbilt drive in which they scored. Had Alabama stopped them there, which they did, and forced a punt, and Alabama gets the ball and scores, and they did score most of the possessions that they had in the game. I don't even know how close the game is, but Alabama extended that drive with one of the dumbest penalties possible. The Vanderbilt game was extremely frustrating because if you just change one play, Alabama wins the game, and you could pick about 10 of them. A 4th and 1 where Pavia threw a ball where a guy got behind Malachi Moore. He just barely caught it on his fingertips, but he got behind Malachi and scored a touchdown on a 4th and 1. That's another one. Boy, if Vandy drops that, which they almost did, if Alabama stops just one of those third downs that Vanderbilt made to extend a drive, Alabama wins. Very frustrating. Can't believe Alabama played as well as they did against Georgia, A+, but you got to give the Vandy performance an F because you lost to a team that you should beat 99 out of 100 times.
This is the least favorite segment I've ever done with you. God,
I'm watching Tennessee next week.
Stomach.
I'm watching South Carolina today. I'm going to watch Tennessee next Monday. That Tennessee game's going to get me, man.
I'd forgotten how many bad episodes in a row you have to watch.
South Carolina, at least, and at the time, who knew South Carolina would finish, just a spot or two out of the playoff? I know that score, I think, it ended up like 27-25, and Alabama sort of hanging on. But that's actually a good win in retrospect. It bothers me when people say, Alabama lost to 2 500 teams, but they beat Georgia, so put them in. Alabama also beat South Carolina, who barely missed the playoff. They beat LSU and Baton Rouge, and let's see Indiana or SMU beat LSU and Baton Rouge. So no one gives Alabama enough credit for wins other than Georgia, because there were some good ones other than no one beat Wisconsin any worse than Alabama did. I know it's Western Kentucky, and people say that's Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky made it to the championship game of Conference USA. Alabama beat them, 63-3?
Yep. All right, that's going to do it for today's pod. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.